Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
All right, so get this right. Today, we're diving deep into dictators.
Oh.
But not just, any dictators. We're talking about how they actually managed to grab power and then hold on to it.
Mm-hmm.
Think Hitler in Germany, Castro in Cuba.
Yeah,
Big names, huge impact.
absolutely.
And before you think, oh no, not another history lecture, I promise you.
Right.
This is about the surprising stuff. This is about how did they pull that off moments.
Yeah.
You ready to be surprised?
Absolutely. I think, as dark as these regimes were,
Yeah, oh yeah.
there's actually so much we can learn from studying them.
Okay.
And not just about history itself, but about, how easily things can go wrong.
Right.
How these seemingly small choices, right, that people make can snowball into these huge, terrifying outcomes.
It's true.
It's really like holding up a mirror to human nature in a way.
Intense, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so to break it down for us,
Okay.
we're going to look at 4 big themes today.
Right.
How they first grabbed power, the role of violence, always a fun one.
Right.
How they use propaganda, because everybody loves a bit of propaganda.
Right.
And then economics and social control. So it's kind of like a playbook,
Yeah.
but one we definitely don't want to be replicating.
Definitely not.
It's crazy how different their paths to power actually were. Though
Yeah.
Hitler, he was very meticulously working within the system of the Weimar Republic,
Right.
basically dismantling it from the inside.
Incredible.
Whereas Castro was just like, revolution, let's go. Complete opposites.
It is striking, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think the common thread between them is that they both exploited crises like nobody's business.
Oh, for sure.
Germany after World War I,
Yeah.
reeling, economically unstable, politically shaky.
Yeah.
And Hitler used that fear, used that desperation to position the Nazis as the answer,
As the solution.
as the solution.
When really they were.
Right.
Well, they were the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
It's hard to believe that he actually became chancellor legally. I know.
Like appointed by President Hindenburg,
I know. It's kind of,
who probably thought he could control him.
it's wild. Yeah. Thought he could control him. Talk about a miscalculation, right?
Fatal.
A fatal one. And once in power, the Nazis, they moved with this terrifying speed.
Yeah.
The Reichstag fire,
Oh, yeah.
which, many suspect they orchestrated,
Yeah.
became the excuse to suspend civil liberties, arrest opponents, and it was basically over before it began.
Wow.
Yeah.
So slow burn to get in, and then bam, total control.
Exactly.
Castro in Cuba, different story.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Cuba,
Castro was fighting against the Batista regime, which,
Right.
economically prosperous on the surface.
Sure.
But underneath, riddled with corruption, inequality, you name it.
Yeah.
So Castro tapped into that discontent, right?
Yeah.
But instead of working within the system, he was like, let's burn it all down. Full-blown revolution.
Wow.
It wasn't about elections for Castro. It was about, flipping the game board entirely. And even after that revolution, he didn't just become this all-powerful dictator overnight.
No.
It's almost scarier how he chipped away at his rivals,
I know.
pushing them out like bit by bit.
Oh, it was incredibly deliberate.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He understood. Public perception was everything.
Okay.
So you have these public trials of Batista officials, right?
Right.
Which played into this whole idea of revolutionary justice.
Okay.
The people wanted revenge, and he gave it to them.
Right.
But then, anyone who questioned him, slowly but surely marginalized, removed from power, out you go.
It's like we imagine revolutions being this instant change.
Right, you think it's a light switch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On, off, new guy.
Exactly.
But Castro shows us that it can be this really slow, deliberate dismantling of the old guard from within, which is almost more insidious.
Oh, absolutely. You're spot on. Yeah.
Right.
Because, you're celebrating the downfall of one regime,
Mm.
but you have to be so incredibly cautious about who steps into that void.
That's very true.
Power is rarely straightforward.
Right.
And it's in those transitions, from one regime to the next.
Yeah.
That's when things can get really, really interesting
Okay.
and terrifying.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got these dictators. They're both in control.
Right.
But their use of violence to maintain that control, that's where things get really, really unsettling.
Yeah, because violence,
Yeah.
as horrific as it is,
Right.
it really reveals a lot about how these regimes actually function,
Yeah.
how they maintain their grip on power.
It's true. I mean, with Hitler, you can't talk about violence without talking about the SS and the concentration camps.
Right. Absolutely.
Like systematic, organized terror
Yeah.
on a scale that's hard to even fathom.
It was cold, calculated,
Yeah.
and aimed at eliminating, entire groups of people who were deemed enemies of the state.
Right, right.
The SS, his elite guard, they were the architects of this terror.
Totally.
And the concentration camps, well,
Yeah.
they became these horrifying symbols of Nazi brutality.
For sure.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't just outward either.
No, not at all.
Like, look at the Night of the Long Knives.
Yeah.
Hitler eliminating his rivals
Exactly.
within the Nazi Party itself. I
Yeah.
mean, talk about ruthless.
He was consolidating his power by any means necessary,
Wow.
even if it meant turning on his own.
It's insane. So then you've got Castro's Cuba.
Right.
Brutal as well, obviously.
Of course, yeah.
But in a completely different way.
Completely.
It felt more chaotic, more
Yeah.
public,
Absolutely.
Almost like this revolutionary justice.
Right.
But taken to a terrifying extreme.
Yeah, that's a really crucial distinction, I think.
Okay.
While both regimes were undeniably defiant, right?
Right.
The actual execution, the atmosphere, completely different. Castro's use of violence, it often played out in public.
Right.
Executions of Batista officials, often in front of large crowds.
In front of everybody.
In front of everybody. It was a message.
Wow.
A visceral display of his power. And then on top of that, you have the CDRs, the Committees for the Defense of the Revolution.
Oh, yeah, the CDRs.
It's like they weaponized your neighbor.
Oh, absolutely.
Can you imagine
living
with this constant fear that anything you say,
right,
anything you do could be reported?
Exactly.
Like the person who lives next door to you.
That was Castro's way of extending his reach into every corner of Cuban society.
Wow.
They were responsible for identifying and reporting any hint of dissent.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It created this environment of constant surveillance and suspicion.
So it wasn't even like a top-down thing like with the SS?
It was like weaving fear into the fabric of everyday life.
Exactly, yeah.
It's a very different approach, isn't it?
So both terrifying.
Oh, without a doubt.
Just in very, very different ways.
Yeah, Hitler went for this very organized, centralized system of terror.
Right.
Whereas Castro, it was more about making fear a part of everyday life.
Yeah. It's like, if you had to pick one or the other, right.
Which, nobody wants to.
No.
God, no.
But it's almost like, which one is scarier? Because they're both awful.
Yeah. It's like comparing, I don't know, a scalpel to a shotgun.
Right.
Both deadly.
Yeah.
But they achieve their goals in very different ways.
Yeah, different approaches. It's a good way to put it.
And it's a crucial lesson for us today, I think, right? Oppression, it doesn't always announce itself with, jackboots and secret police.
Right.
It can be much more subtle, insidious, woven into the very fabric of society.
It's true. So then how did they get their people to buy into these systems?
The million-dollar question.
Right. That's where the propaganda comes in.
Propaganda. The art of persuasion.
Yes.
Both Hitler and Castro, they are masters at crafting their own narratives.
Oh, yes?
And then making sure that everybody heard them.
It's wild, right? How these dictators, they didn't just rely on fear and propaganda, but they actually used economics and social policies, to really tighten that grip on their countries. Absolutely. It's about weaving a narrative, but also creating a system where people feel like they have something to gain, even if it comes at a cost.
And, I mean, you can't talk about this stuff without seeing the huge clash between Hitler and Castro. Their goals were completely opposite.
Oh, totally. On the surface, their economic policies might seem kind of similar, right?
Yeah.
But when you dig deeper, their motivations, worlds apart.
Right.
Hitler, he was driven by this vision of racial purity, Aryan dominance.
Right.
He wanted to build this economic powerhouse, but it was all about fueling his war machine.
Yeah, and he did some big things, right? Tackled unemployment, boosted industry, like the Autobahn.
The Autobahn, yeah.
People are still talking about that thing.
It's incredible, yeah.
But it's like you kind of have to wonder, could something that we see as a marvel of engineering today be, repurposed for something really sinister tomorrow? It makes you think.
It's a chilling thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it reminds us that even these seemingly positive achievements, right? They could be, tainted by their true purpose.
Totally, yeah.
The Autobahn, as amazing as it was for its time, it was also designed for moving troops quickly.
Right.
And his rearmament program.
Yeah,
it provided jobs, but it ultimately led to unimaginable destruction.
Yeah. It's hard to separate the two.
Exactly. You can't separate those seemingly positive economic outcomes
Yeah.
from the horrifying context that they existed in.
So true. And then you've got Castro on the other side,
Right.
nationalizing industries, redistributing land. It was a whole different game plan, economically speaking. Makes you think about how many different ways leaders can use economics,
It really does.
to achieve their goals.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Castro's approach, it came from a very different place, right? This was about socialist belief.
Mm-hmm.
He genuinely wanted to redistribute wealth, create a more equitable society. Now, whether his methods were effective or, justified, that's a whole other debate.
Totally.
But his motivations were fundamentally different from Hitler's.
Yeah. Completely different. And he did accomplish some good things, right?
He did, yes.
Socially. Like, you look at the 1961 literacy campaign,
Right.
wiped out illiteracy in Cuba
Almost overnight, basically.
in like a year. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Even if it, it served a political purpose for him.
Of course. Yeah.
Still a good outcome.
It was a remarkable feat.
Yeah.
And, it highlights this really complex legacy
Okay.
that a lot of authoritarian regimes have, right?
Yeah.
Where even amidst the oppression, the control,
Right.
there can be these glimmers of genuine progress.
It's true.
And of course, it doesn't excuse the atrocities,
Right.
but it makes us really grapple with the nuances of history.
Yeah, for sure. It's never
Black and white.
Yeah, exactly. Now, before we wrap up, I want to touch on something you mentioned earlier, historiography.
Okay.
Because even when we're talking about these guys, Hitler, Castro, these are big names. Everybody thinks they know them.
Right.
But history is always open to interpretation, right?
Always. And, there are entire schools of thought
Yeah.
dedicated to understanding these figures.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Like, what? Give me some examples.
Okay, so take Hitler, for instance.
Right, yeah.
You have the structuralist view,
Okay.
which sees his rise as this consequence of the Weimar Republic's weaknesses. The economic turmoil,
Yeah.
the political instability,
Right, right.
They argue that these conditions, they created a vacuum.
Okay.
And guess who was there to fill it?
Hitler. So if we look at the world today through that lens,
Yeah.
that structuralist lens,
Yeah, what do we see?
what do we see? What are those conditions that are ripe for,
Exactly.
for somebody to come in and...
Well, I think we see a world, right, wrestling with some seriously complex challenges.
Oh, yeah.
Climate change, economic inequality, political polarization,
Mhm.
pick your poison, right?
Yeah.
And these crises, they can create this fertile ground for extremism to take root.
Right.
Because when people feel like the system is failing them,
Yeah.
they're much more susceptible to those who come along and promise those simple solutions.
Right.
Even if those solutions are dangerous.
Right, right. It's like that old saying, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes.
Exactly.
Right.
It's a cautionary tale. for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay, so we've got the structuralists. What about the intentionalists?
The intentionalists.
What's their take?
They're all about Hitler's individual drive, his ambition.
Okay, so they're looking at him like as a person.
Exactly.
Ah.
It's about the individual, the choices they make, the impact they have on the world.
Okay.
And, it's a good reminder for us today
Okay.
that individuals matter.
Okay.
Leaders with a dangerous vision, but with the charisma to sway others.
Right.
They can have a huge impact on the course of history.
Yeah. And I feel like we see that today, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's like that quote, right? Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety.
Wow, that's a good one.
Right. So we've got to be wary of these figures who present themselves as saviors,
Right.
the ones with all the answers.
Because usually those answers are not good.
Because often their solutions involve silencing dissent and consolidating power,
Right.
and all at the expense of freedom.
Okay, so shifting gears a little bit here.
Okay.
Back to Castro, we've got the revisionists
Right.
and dependency theory.
Two very different perspectives.
Two very different perspectives, yeah. So break it down for me.
Okay, so the revisionists, they argue that Castro, his main goal was really establishing a Marxist state.
Okay.
They kind of downplay the role of U.S. influence in the Cuban Revolution. Yeah.
Interesting. So how does that viewpoint help us understand things happening in the world right now?
Well, I think it highlights the enduring power of ideology
Okay.
because leaders, they're often driven by these deeply held beliefs
Right.
and this desire to kind of like reshape the world in their image. So when we're trying to understand conflicts that are happening today,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's really crucial to understand those ideological roots,
Right.
the historical grievances that are fueling them.
Yeah, because sometimes it's not about resources or
No.
territory.
It goes deeper than that.
It's about, like, their worldview, how they think things should be.
It's about competing visions for how society should be structured, how the world should work.
Man, like you said earlier, history doesn't just repeat, it rhymes.
It rhymes.
Yeah.
And, that brings us to dependency theory,
Okay.
which flips the script a bit.
Okay.
They emphasize the impact of U.S. imperialism, economic exploitation as a driving force behind the Cuban Revolution.
Okay.
So it encourages us to kind of zoom out,
Okay.
look at the bigger picture,
Okay.
and examine the long shadow of colonialism.
It's all connected.
It really
But
is.
it's not just about what happened, in the last 50 years. It's about
It's about the patterns. Yeah, the power dynamics between nations, how they continue to shape our world today.
It's like we have to understand those imbalances,
Absolutely.
those injustices,
Yeah.
to make sense of all the stuff that we see happening in the world right now, like the conflicts, the tensions.
Because it's all connected.
It's all connected.
It is. And these different schools of thought, right?
Yeah.
The structuralists, the intentionalists,
Yeah.
the revisionists, dependency theory.
It's a lot.
They're not just about, interpreting the past. They're different lenses
Okay.
through which we can try to understand our present
Okay.
and maybe even get a glimpse into the future.
So the more we know about the past,
Yeah,
the more we can kind of use those patterns
exactly.
to navigate what's going on right now.
To make better choices, hopefully.
To make better choices, to try to, hopefully head in a better direction.
It's a powerful reminder, isn't it?
Yeah. It is. It is. We've covered so much ground today, from Hitler and Castro, these two dictators, to how those stories are still so relevant to us today. We've talked about how they grabbed power, how they held on to it, the devastating consequences.
And ideologies, the power of belief.
Yeah. And how important it is to be vigilant, to be critical thinkers.
To never take our freedoms for granted.
Exactly. And to have empathy,
Absolutely.
for other people.
Yeah. To remember that history, this isn't just some dusty old textbook.
Yeah.
This is a living, breathing thing.
Yeah.
It shapes us every single day.
So, as you're going about your day, today, tomorrow,
Keep asking those questions.
keep asking questions, right? Question everything. Question the information that you're seeing. Challenge abuses of power.
Be engaged.
And never, never underestimate the power that you have to shape the world, right? To make it more just, to make it more equitable.
Because history isn't just something that happened. It's something that we are all creating every single day.
So good. Until next time, keep diving deep, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.